Bud Not Buddy by Christopher Paul Curtis, Chapter 11, Part 2. The woman said, "What kind of man is he that he let this child be so thin? And look at the condition of the boy's clothes. Everything is either too small for him or almost in tatters. Where is this child's mother? There's not much of a woman's touch about him." Lefty Lewis said, "It seems to me that the Mrs. Calloway I knew passed a long time ago. The boy says he's 10, and I'm sure she died quite a while before that. But you know how musicians are. There must be at least a few Mrs. Calloways I don't know anything about." That meant that my dad was married to someone before he married my mom. Lefty Lewis's daughter said, "Well, I think it's a sin. I'm half a mind to keep this boy for a while to put some fear in his daddy's heart. But he probably wouldn't even miss him." Lefty Lewis said, "Now, you stop being so judgmental. Herman's got a reputation for being no-nonsense, not mean. Does this child have any brothers or sisters?" "I believe he's got a sister, but she'd have to be his half-sister. She must be full-grown by now." The woman pulled the blanket back over my legs and shook me again. I was glad I could stop pretending I was asleep. I was sick and tired of hearing about how skinny I am and what a mixed-up family I come from. She said real soft, "Bud, wake up. Come on, sweetie. I've got a nice breakfast waiting for you." "Food?" I started blinking and acting like those were the first words I'd heard that morning. I said, "Huh?" like I was kind of confused. The woman smiled real big and said, "Oh, I see. That got your attention, didn't it? Good morning, young man." "Good morning, ma'am." "Good morning, Mr. Lewis." He said, "Hey, you remembered my name. I'm impressed. Good morning, Walking Lily. We've got to hit the road in a bit. Better hurry up and get some food in your belly." He acted like he was whispering just to me when he said, "The food in this joint ain't the best, but I guarantee after you eat here you won't be hungry for days. This meal's going to be sitting on your stomach like a rock for a good long time." The woman said, "Ignore him, Bud. My father doesn't mean anything. He just can't stop teasing." I said, "I know, ma'am. He told me I've got a head shaped like a peanut." The woman slapped her father on the arm. "Papa, I can't believe you. Can't believe you've teased this child already. What is on your mind?" Lefty Lewis rubbed his hand over my head and said, "Look at this noggin. I rest my case. Boy looks like one of George Washington Carver's experiments, sprouted legs and run off. You sure you're not from Tuskegee, Alabama, Bud?" I said, "No, sir." The woman sucked in her lower lip and swallowed a smile before she said, "See, Bud, he can't help himself. But he really doesn't mean anything, do you, Papa?" The way she asked that, you'd have to be pretty stupid not to know how to answer her. Lefty Lewis said, "Not a thing. It's just that you—" His daughter spoke up. "My name is Mrs. Sleet, Bud." "Pleased to meet you, ma'am." "Now, while you wash up, I'm going to get some clothes that my boy outgrew a while ago. Barely been used. So when you get dressed, you come on down and we'll eat. You chose a great day to visit. We're having a very special breakfast today. Pancakes, sausages, and toast, and a big glass of orange juice. You can meet Scott and Kim, too. How's that sound?" "That sounds real good, ma'am. Thank you very much." "Don't mention it. It's a pleasure to have such a well-mannered young visitor." Mrs. Sleet and Lefty Lewis left the room. As soon as they were a little bit down the hall, I could hear her start in on scolding her father again. "I just can't believe it. You know, Mama was right about you." All I could hear next was him mumbling some answer, then her slapping his arm again. After I got out of the bathroom, I saw that Mrs. Sleet had put some clean clothes on the bed. My old clothes were gone, all except for my drawers, which I hadn't taken off. She'd even put clean drawers out for me, so when I put them on, I stuck my old ones down in the pocket of my new pants. I could ditch them when I got to Grand Rapids. It's too embarrassing to have strangers look at your dirty drawers, even if the stranger is as nice as Mrs. Sleet. The new clothes were just a little bit too big, but they were long pants and not knickers, so I didn't care. I rolled cuffs into the pants and sleeves, and they fit pretty doggone good. Man, my first pair of trousers. I let my nose lead me down to where the smell of pancakes and toast was coming from. The Sleets had a room for eating, and it had a great big table right in the middle of it. The first thing I noticed was a huge pile of pancakes sitting on a blue and white plate on top of the table. Lefty Lewis was sitting with Mrs. Sleet's kids. The little girl had a big smile, and the boy was looking at me kind of hard. It wasn't one of those put-up-your-dukes looks. It was just a look like one dog gives another dog that might be passing through his neighborhood. Lefty Lewis said, "Bud, these two worrisome midgets are my favorite grandkids. Kim is my favorite granddaughter, and Scott is my favorite grandson. Of course, they're my only grandkids, so in fairness, you'd have to say they're also my least favorite grandkids." These two kids had had a lot of practice being around their teasing old granddad, because they didn't pay him no mind at all. I said, "Hi, my name's Bud, not Buddy." The little girl said, "That's a strange name, Bud not Buddy." And even though she was kind of young and scrawny to be teasing folks, I could tell that that was exactly what she was doing. Lefty Lewis laughed and said, "That's my girl." Then he went into the kitchen. Scott looked up to make sure the grown folks weren't around and said, "You really run away from home?" I had to stop and think. It's one thing to lie to a grown-up. Most times adults want to hear something that lets them take their attention off you and put it on something else. That makes it easy and not too bad to lie to them. You're really just giving them what they want. It's different when you lie to another kid. Most times kids really do want to know what they're asking you. I guess I'd been thinking too long, 'cause he said, "You ran all the way from Grand Rapids to Owasso? Was it 'cause your daddy used to beat you?" I could answer that with a swear for God true. Shucks, my daddy never laid a hand on me in his life. Then how come you run? I didn't like where I was. That wasn't a lie. Well, if you're lying about your daddy beating you, you better scram right after breakfast, 'cause my Gramps is taking you straight back home. My daddy never laid a hand on me. The little girl said, "Scott, you talk too much. Let him sit down." Then she told me, "Mama's going to be bringing the sausages in a minute. You like sausages?" Uh-huh. I'd never had sausages before, but if that was what was making the house smell so good, I was going to love it. Kim said, "Good, 'cause my grandpa brought them all the way from Grand Rapids. He always brings us good food, and we're going to share it with you, 'cause Mama says you're our special guest and we have to treat you nice. Am I being nice? So far. Good. I'll make a deal with you." Uh-oh. What kind of deal? "I'll sing a song that I made up all by myself, and when I'm done I get to ask you one question, and you have to answer and cross your heart you'll tell the truth." This didn't sound too bad. Okay. Here goes. It took me a very long time to make this song up, so I hope you like it. The boy said, "Oh, brother." Kim sang, "Mommy says no, Mommy says no. I listen, you don't. Wah-ha-ha. The building falls down, the building falls down. You get crushed, I don't. Wah-ha-ha-ha." Boy, that was about the worst song I'd ever heard. Kim stood up and bowed like a princess. I clapped my hands together kind of soft under the table. She said, "Thank you very much." Scott just shook his head. Kim said, "Okay, that's my part of the deal. Now you've got to keep your part and answer any question I ask." "Okay. Now you can tell me all about how your mother died." Scott's foot kicked at her under the table. I said, "Who told you my mama died?" The little girl said, "Oops," and stuffed something from her hand into her mouth. "My mama got sick. She died real fast. She didn't feel no pain or no suffering." Kim said, "I hope my mother never dies." Scott said, "Stupid, everybody's got to die." Kim said, "Ooh, I'm telling Mama you called me stupid." He said, "You do, and I'll tell her that you've got one of those pancakes in the pocket of your dress." She shut right up. I told her, "He's right, everybody's got to die. It's not sad unless they do it real slow and suffer. My mama died so quick and painless that she didn't even have time to close her eyes. She didn't even have time to make a face like she was hurting." Both of Lefty Lewis's grandkids looked real surprised at this news. Mrs. Sleet came into the room with another blue plate, covered with little round pieces of meat. Those had to be the sausages. She saw the way her kids were looking at me with their mouths half opened and said, "Now you two aren't talking Bud's ear off, are you?" Scott said, "No, Mama, I'm not, but Kim's coming real close to." Kim said, "I was not. I was just making pleasant conversation." Mrs. Sleet laughed and set the plate on the table right in front of me. Lefty Lewis came out with a big glass jug filled with orange juice and sat down next to me. Mrs. Sleet sat down and said, "Scott and Kim, would you say the grace, please?" Everyone ducked their heads down, and the two kids said, "God is great, God is good, let us thank Him for our food. Amen." Then people started passing the big blue plates around and stabbing toast and pancakes and sausages with their forks. I watched to see how much everyone took and tried to take the same. Then I started to watch how much food the two kids put on their fork every time, so I wouldn't look like a pig. Lefty Lewis noticed I was taking a long time and told his daughter, "See what I told you, Nina? Poor Bud Not Buddy is so skinny and his stomach has shrunk down so much that just smelling the food has got the boy full." "Oh well, I guess that just means more food for the rest of us." Everyone except for me and Mrs. Sleet yelled a big cheer. Eating with the Sleets and Lefty Lewis was really hard to do. Not because they had bad table manners or nothing, but because they talked through the whole breakfast, and they kept trying to get me to talk too. At the home, after grace was said, we weren't allowed to say boo. Eating and being quiet is a hard habit to break. Every time one of these Sleets would talk to me and look at me like they expected an answer, I'd look around first to make sure no one was watching. At the home, if you got caught talking during mealtime, you'd have to get up and leave your food. If these Sleets had to live under those rules, they'd all starve to death. They talked after every swallow. They talked after every drink they took. They talked whilst they were wiping off their lips. Shucks, the little girl Kim talked with milk running down her throat. Some of the time her words got gluggled up in what she was swallowing, and they laughed. Man, did they laugh. It's hard to tell whose story they were laughing at. They were doing so much chattering. Lefty Lewis was talking about radio shows, and Scott was talking about going to a baseball game to watch Lefty Lewis pitch, and Kim was talking about a little girl she didn't like, and Mrs. Sleet was talking about some people called redcaps. Kim said to her mother, "Mommy, can't you tell that Bud Not Buddy doesn't know what a redcap is? You gotta explain better." Mrs. Sleet said, "Oh, sorry, Bud. Redcaps are the men who work at the railroad station loading the trains and taking people's bags to their cars. That's what Mr. Lewis does. My husband is a Pullman porter. He takes care of the people once they're on the trains." Kim said, "Yeah, our dad gets to travel all over the country on trains for free." Scott said, "That's 'cause he's working. It's not for free. He gets paid to do it." Lefty Lewis swallowed a big hunk of sausage and said, "And you know what, Bud? I bet the thing he misses most is Nina's cooking. Can't tell you how proud I am of how far my daughter's cooking has come. This might be hard to believe, but she used to be such a bad cook that her fried chicken was known to have turned a chicken hawk into a vegetarian." Scott and Kim and Mrs. Sleet started busting a gut. "Yep," Lefty Lewis said. "I brought a friend to Flint a couple of years ago, and even though I'd warned him, he tried to be polite and ate 4 of her pancakes. Poor soul, held his stomach all the way back to Grand Rapids. Said to me, 'Lefty, I don't mean to show any disrespect, but those weren't pancakes your daughter served me. They were pain cakes.'" Mrs. Sleet laughed along with everyone else and said, "Well, I'm sure I don't need to hear any more of this," and picked up the empty sausage plate and went into the kitchen. As soon as she got out of the room, Kim whispered, "Quick, Grandpa, tell Bud Not Buddy how many times you had to pull the car over when you two were going back to Grand Rapids so that man could get out and vomit on the side of the road." Before Lefty Lewis could answer, Mrs. Sleet came out of the kitchen with a big wooden spoon and whopped her father a good lick in the head.